Elon Musk just revealed, just flat out said it, how the rivals of Tesla can't catch up and maybe even beat Tesla at their own game. Will they listen? They haven't in the past. Remember, a while back, he basically unveiled all of the patents for Tesla in hopes that other car makers will use them and produce great electric cars, maybe better electric cars than Tesla. Did they listen? No, no. They were like, what? What? We can't hear behind all the gas engines working behind us over there in our factories, and they done absolutely nothing with it. And now once again he's telling them what they need to do. And a lot of people think that he's calling out straight up Porsche Taycan that had a pretty tough week. There's a little bit of news to share there, which I will in just 1 second. But overall, it looks like, I mean, I have to say, as a former Tesla owner and a current non-Tesla electric car owner, I might have, he has a point there. Will they listen? Now, the best part is Eli Burton of My Tesla Adventure is going to join me. We're going to have this conversation together. I think he has quite a few ideas as well. And he has a very interesting view on Porsche. As huge of a Tesla fan he has been, Porsche Taycan has appealed to him at one point. No longer. He's going to share that with you as well. All of this is coming up next. Taking over the world, electrifying the world, E4 Electric. Welcome to E4 Electric, your number one source of unbiased electric car news. If this is your first time here, where have you been? But I have the subscribe button already parallel parked, self-parked actually, right below this video. So go ahead and click on it so you don't miss anything moving forward. All right, so Eli is going to join us in just a second. This is his weekly Supercharged segment. But there's a bit of a news to share here. And just like I said, Elon seemed to be calling out Porsche Taycan in his recent comments with his interview with Motor Trend. This is, you can read that interview, but I got to tell you, the most interesting part I'll share to you in just 1 second. As you can see, France was there. They brought the very first prototype of a Model S. They had a good time. But now let's share something about Taycan, because the best thing about the Taycan, once we all made peace with the fact it's not going to look like Mission E, was the insane charge rate of 350 kilowatts. And we knew that Ionity and Electrify America, the fast charging networks, they're making really big strides in both Europe and here in the United States. We're going to allow for 350 kilowatt charging. And guess what? This week, the report came out that it's not going to be 350. I mean, it will be, but like in 2021, it's only going to be, and I'm saying only, it's 250 kilowatts, but they will match what Tesla does now with the Model 3. And that's a huge disappointment. So a lot of people believe that Elon's comments were targeted at Porsche. Now, here's what he said. He said they make, and he's talking about the rest of the industry, they make all these cars that have no soul or no heart, and they wonder why nobody feels anything for them. Why should they? Now, the reason people believe that he was calling out Porsche specifically is because here's a screenshot of one of their promos, essentially saying how not only have a soul, it's going to be electrified. So, but he has a point, and to be honest with you, this could be the answer to the rest of the manufacturers on what they can do to do this. Now, I have even more of a bit of an insight now that I've been in the industry for a while. What's happening inside of those legacy manufacturers? I'm going to share it as I talk to Eli. But I have to agree. I mean, do all of these electric cars have a soul? Okay, there's one that is hard to argue because it's in the name, but at the same time, this might just be, judging by what Kia is doing with their electric cars, the biggest irony of the car industry right now. So let's talk about this. Let me bring Eli on. We're going to talk about it. Before that, of course, a quick reminder that this video and this channel is sponsored by Byton. Check out their all-electric SUV, which I do have. I think will have a soul. We'll see. Starting at only $45,000 coming to the US and Europe at the end of the next year. Join myself and tens of thousands of other people who've already reserved one. $0 to reserve, about a minute of your time. So go to the description of this video and reserve your Byton today. All right, without further ado, let's hear from Eli. Eli, how are you doing, my friend?
Alex, it's so good to be back on your show, and I'm really excited to be on here talking about this topic and the Porsche Taycan.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, let's talk about Porsche Taycan because you have said to me a few times now, and I think you even posted on your social media that when Mission E came out, and let me just show you the picture just so everybody remembers, you loved it so much, you actually would have bought it, even though you're, diehard Tesla fan. And so this is what the original one looks like. Let me show you what it looks like now. And this is the latest, as uncamouflaged version as I found. And I literally tried to find the best picture. This is what it looks like now. And, it feels like it's just gone through one of those face apps, well, the face app, where it aged. It just aged into something legacy alike. I still like the look, but you're no longer looking to buy this car.
So yeah, when this was first announced, Mission E, they showed us this really cool new futuristic design. They showed this experience of an interior that had all these screens. They even had this crazy like drone thing that you could have launch out of the car and control it via this control mechanism in the car. Like it looked like they were actually designing something new for the future. They were going to take advantage of being this new type of vehicle, ground up electric, and it was exciting. And in fact, my initial comment on Facebook was, I want this for my second car. It looked awesome. Now, granted, even in the early beginning of it, I didn't believe at all it was going to beat the specs of the Model S P100D. I was okay with that. I wanted it because this car looked like it was cool. It looked like a Porsche of the future.
So let's talk about, I mean, because, I don't think Elon was just calling out Porsche. I think he was just calling out the entire industry. Uh, do you think that the difference here, why no one is really able to catch up to Tesla? It's been around for now. The Model S came out 2012. I remember because I bought one, and then it's been 7 years. Why do you think? We're talking about You understand the startups, right? Startups take a while to, but why do you think the legacy manufacturers, and genuinely, why do you think they just can't catch up? Is he right? Do they put no heart in it?
So I think where Elon Musk comes at product and product design is very much the same as Steve Jobs did. And I think there's a lot of comparisons between him and Apple and him and Steve because they both had this crazy awesome product obsession that if we make a product, it should be designed so that our customers love it. That it doesn't just solve a problem, that they absolutely love it. And that's why brands like Apple and also Tesla have such passionate owners, followers that turn into evangelists because they've made a product really engineered to give them an incredible experience. I would say that the automotive sector in general, for the most part, is selling a vehicle to solve transportation, but they're not building something that's going to make passionate fans who are going to want to show all of their friends. Like I've been in nice cars before. I've owned nice cars. This is the first car I've ever been a part of that I want to show it to everybody I meet. And I think that's just a problem that these companies had and that they've not been looking to serve customers that way. I mean, there's a lot of cars that get made. There's a lot of cars that get sold. There's a lot of cars that get made profit, but you're not going to ride home about it. Tesla is making a car that you want to ride home about. And it's disappointing specifically with Porsche because out of everybody who's going electric, it looked like Porsche was going to be the first legacy auto manufacturer to build something that was just amazing. What Audi has done with the e-tron, I'm actually fine with that. I'm fine with the fact that Audi basically just took their car and made an electric version of that. I think that's fine. I think there's going to be a market for that, no problem. But if you want to make a product that's going to really take off, and if you're going to get me to buy that as somebody who's in the Tesla experience, you need to put that same level of effort into creating something awesome, creating something new. And Porsche Taycan started looking like that. And it's now been degraded back down that from the outside, it just looks like another Porsche. And even from the inside, they've got a little bit of screens and stuff. But depending on what they do with the software, I'm just no longer impressed with the vehicle. And it's a shame because where they started was ambitious and it was a risk. And I think it's one they should have stuck with. I think if they had stuck with their initial design, we could really be having a conversation of, oh, are you going to buy the Model S or the Porsche? And that actually potentially come from existing Tesla owners.
Now, it's funny you mentioned Audi e-tron because there was an article on electric which kind of gathered a lot of pictures of what happening. And I really couldn't believe my eyes because Audi has been buying spots and space at the locations of Tesla superchargers, which look like in Europe, but I'm not really sure if it was also in the US, and essentially advertising e-tron at the Tesla supercharger. I don't know what else would represent this fact that they are just trying to catch up and follow, and there's very little innovation. I was excited about the e-tron. I was a reservation holder. I was this close to pulling a trigger, and seeing them literally embarrass themselves and kind of admit the defeat, if you will, advertising in superchargers is pretty sad. I'm disappointed, and do you think they're just trying to stay in the game, rather than innovate in one way or another?
I think they have competing interests that they're dealing with internally. One being they're making a commitment to electric vehicles and they need to sell them. But at the same time, they don't seem to really want to go after the sales of regular vehicles, ICE vehicles either. And I think this strategy of parking at Tesla superchargers is shameless. They absolutely should not be doing that. But even going so far to buy ad space at Tesla superchargers, Tesla, you're not, it's going to be a very hard sell to convince somebody who's in the Tesla ecosystem to go to e-tron, because the Tesla owners know everything that Tesla has to offer and know all the things that Tesla has versus what the e-tron is offering. That, I mean, I see this being a bad investment. It looks bad. It looks weak on the brand. It doesn't look like you're in a strong position when you're going and parking out in somebody else's driveway to try and push your product. It is a bad look.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a brand mistake too. It damages the brand in a way that's not even worth whatever it might do for vehicle sales.
Yeah.
But on the other side, like I don't think they were intended to make this a super innovative car, but I think if they really want to be a big player in this, especially with all the startups coming in electric that are designing from the ground up and are and they have to nail customer experience. That's one of the things too that startups have a bit of an advantage because they're coming in as the underdog. The pressure is on them to make an amazing product, and much more amazing than what you can buy. Because if you don't do that, there's not going to be a compelling enough reason from people to go away from what's safe. So you've got Tesla, who came in and completely blown it away in design and experience and performance and autopilot assist features and all this stuff. And you've got Byton that's working their way to as well. Like all these guys have to make a product that is exceptionally better than what everybody else is doing for you to be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to give these new guys a chance. So if the legacy manufacturers sit on their heels for too long, at some point their market share is going to continue to get eroded. And I'd like to see them not mess this up, because they could be the fastest to us getting a large increase in electric vehicles in the world, right? Yeah. Like Tesla may someday produce 1 million vehicles a year. We need 10 million vehicles a year being made that are electric.
Now, let me disagree with you a little bit, because actually e-tron, I think, is very competitive in Tesla in terms of if someone wants a regular SUV, because Tesla does not make a regular SUV, especially an off-road SUV. I mean, when e-tron brought me to Spain, they gave us half a day going to this insane, just scary, and I have footage of it on my channel where you would go up and down, and it's off-road experience that you can't have in a Tesla Model X, because that's not what it's used for. So they can compete, but the fact that they are not trying to compete, they're more trying to just try to stay relevant, is just sad. But let me move on from this, because I promised I'm going to share some sort of inside knowledge that I have. So let me just take a stage for just a second. I kind of want to hear your maybe feedback on this. And I'm not even sure if I shared this with you privately, maybe a little bit, but now that I've been in this for a couple of years, and I've been invited to some events, and I was fortunate enough to talk to a lot of executives, including CEOs of these companies, and kind of see what's going on the inside. And here's my impression: the teams that are working on the electric cars, they have soul. I can vouch for them. They have soul and they have a heart. These teams are mini Tesla teams within those legacy manufacturers, right? But much like what happened with BMW I program, right? People who were there, Carsten Breinfeld, who became the CEO of Byton, they all got fed up with BMW not letting them, essentially lead or even breathe. They went out and created Byton. But all these teams, even now, and again, I don't want to name names, but you can guess what they are. They are struggling within this legacy manufacturers, where you're right. There's a conflict of interest there. BMW just pretty much fired their CEO because of that. Because one of the reasons. So the heart is there, the soul is there, but the money and I kind of understand. But this big executives from over there are just crushing it, and they leave to go to startups, or they just kind of go like, okay, listen, I just work here. What do you think needs to happen, and when do you think will happen, where that heart and soul from those teams will rise up to the executive level, to the leaders of these manufacturers, and that's where the revolution and the turnaround will happen?
I've read into this too to try and understand what's happening better. And from what I understand, the big weight being pushed down on executives of these companies from being able to drive the ship now and for them to look to the future, truly go all in on making amazing electric products that are continue to stay relevant and competitive, is driven by the large investors in these companies not being willing to take the multiple years and hits to profits it's going to take to do it. Because whenever they do go all in, there's going to be a multi-year transition where their existing, they'll convert as much of their existing manufacturing as they can, but they're going to have a large amount of manufacturing assets that are now going to be worthless to them and are going to be difficult to resell elsewhere because other manufacturers are going to electric as well. So there's going to be assets that get depreciated in value that lose value because it won't be producing. There'll be ramp up time in building factories. There'll be ramp up time in battery scale. There will be multiple years where they lose a lot of money in making this transition and then go back to being profitable. And I think, unfortunately, and except for the legacy manufacturers that their investors get it and are willing to look at a longer horizon, some of these legacy manufacturers are going to wait so late to do this that they're going to permanently lose market share to some of these new startups that are going to take away part of their lunch money. It's just inevitable, right? This is what happens when you have disruptions in industries. The existing players who see it and adapt survive. The ones that don't either lose their foothold, they get smaller, or ultimately some of them get knocked out entirely. So it's going to be their loss if they don't get this right. And I'm not exactly sure what the answer is. I mean, I think these executives need to be stronger and make more compelling cases to investors of what needs to happen. I think the other side I think can really push the pendulum is when nation states come in and put regulation to force this. Then the investors can do whatever they want. But once those deadlines get put in place, I think that's going to be one of the important things that help make it happen. So I think Europe being more aggressive and setting these targets on ending production of ICE cars and stuff like that, and more countries doing that, I think will force the entire market sooner to be like, okay, guys, government's now mandated. We all have to do this. It's an equal playing field. I don't get to squeak out an extra year of profits on ICE cars and be greedy. We all have to do this on an aggressive timeline. Let's go. I think that's the most realistic way. Otherwise, I see a lot of these legacy manufacturers are losing it. And you know what? It was great to see BMW, torch their CEO as a result of the way things are happening. Now, granted, it was a result of very poor sales, and it seems very clear that BMW is getting their lunch eaten by the Model 3.
Yeah.
And if they don't come up with something to answer and they don't start moving quickly, that's going to continue to decline. So I think BMW we're seeing maybe in the initial steps of going, we're late to the game, time to go. We'll see how it plays out, but that may have been a step to see BMW is going to start course correcting, and their investors are like, okay, we're going to not have profits for the next 2 years, but in 5 years we're going to be hugely profitable again. And this is, by the way, for people who don't follow Wall Street and stuff like that. In the U.S., companies are held by an unbelievable metric, which all investors care about is the next quarter, and that's insane. So we've unfortunately gotten into this world now that hyper focuses on the quarter, and that's being driven by the investors. So we've got to get people to have longer horizons.
Yeah. So one thing I should mention, you mentioned Europe. I just did a story. I don't know if you've noticed, because when I was researching the story, it was hard to research because even Nissan didn't have it on their press site. But there is an electric truck, a electric pickup truck with a 175-mile range, which is decent, that's going in production next month. Well, the reason we don't know much about it is it's in China, and the reason it is in China is because Nissan and many other manufacturers are held down to very strict standards starting next year. And so they're partnering up with the local Chinese company. In this case, they partner up with Dongfeng Motors to produce all of a sudden an electric truck, something that everyone else has been waiting in Europe and in the US. Granted, we want this to be up to the standards, but China, you're right.
Faster than 68 miles per hour for sure.
Yeah, that was a weird. Now the thing is, the question is, did they software limit that? There's a theory that they software limit that to keep the 175-mile range. So, but it is there. So, but my bigger point is that you're right. The regulations is what's going to really push this. Unfortunately, I really thought it was just going to be Tesla, but the regulations are. Now, let me ask you a tough question. So, Now, we can sit here and poop all over BMW and Audi, and rightfully so. I don't mind doing that. I think I feel a little bit shortchanged by those brands because when I saw their efforts and I met their teams, I was very excited. It was featuring a lot of Audi and a lot of other brands on the show. And now, as you see, I've been a little disappointed. But okay, so tomorrow you wake up in the morning, and we should make a movie out of this. You wake up and you're the CEO of BMW Group, and you now go, oh, I remember Elon said, I need to make a car people will fall in love with. What are your top three things that you do immediately in the first month to get the ship in the right direction?
I think the first thing I would come at this is product design, ground up. We've got to design something that's not like what we've done before. And again, now that you have this whole electric thing involved, we can completely redesign a vehicle. We have so much more space to work with. There's so many different considerations, but it would be a ground up design and say, how do we give our customers who've had a certain experience, they're used to a certain amount of performance driving, they're used to some of these things. How do we take that and bring that into the 21st century? That's going to be the first thing on product design. Second thing is, how quickly can I get into the battery production business? And I think the third thing would be holding organization-wide meetings where I discuss the plans of the future of the organization. And anybody who cannot ultimately be persuaded in a leadership position that this is the idea they need to get on board with, they get fired immediately. Because if you're going to really make one of these organizational shifts, there's going to be people whose mindsets are not going to change, and you've got to remove them. Because if they stay, they will continue to have the past influence what you're trying to do with the future. And that's just what happens when you make an organizational transformational shift. You put it out there, you give people time to get on board. And at the end of the day, everybody can, there can be people who disagree, but they have to disagree and commit. If they disagree and say, I'm not willing to do this, then then they no longer can belong at the organization. And that's got to happen from the top executive all the way down to the lowest level manager. Everybody in leadership has to be on board with the new direction. And that's going to result in a lot of firings and a lot of turnover.
All right, but a follow-up here, because that would be all good if this was a privately held company, but BMW Group is a publicly traded company, so the board, as soon as you say that, is going to say, "Hey, Eli, can we talk? When are we going to see some money? You're here to make us money. You're not here to make an amazing car."
Well,
What are
if
you
I'm
going to tell
CEO of a
them?
publicly traded company, before I go and do something like this, I'm going to have told the board that's what I'm doing and gotten their approval. Otherwise, I'm not going to have a job the next day,
That's
right?
true.
I
And
mean, unlike a private company where CEO is the final decision maker, the CEO is not. The CEO reports to the board. So for a CEO to do any radical change, to do anything big like this, he has to have sold the board on it, right?
unless you're CEO of Tesla, I think there's an exception there.
Well, I mean, Elon Musk is not the majority shareholder in Tesla. He still has to convince the board. That's one of the things a lot of people don't like. He does. Like,
No, no,
I
I
think
know, I
he's
get it.
a
I'm just
valuable
saying
brand.
the board is. I mean, it's getting better now. I do have to say, but the board is a bunch of his friends and family members essentially, which actually not a bad thing. I am all
No,
for.
no, definitely. And for them to stay true to the vision, they have to be. But all I'm saying is he doesn't control 50% of the board seats. The board seats are controlled by majority investors, and he is not a majority investor. His board seats are filled with his friends and family because they're his board seats, his 38% of shares, or I forgot, 30% of shares that he has in the company. So he only controls 30% of the board. Now he does have some big billionaire investor friends who've bought in a lot of shares and do have some seats for sure, but he doesn't control them. Now I would say in the case of Tesla, Elon is so important for the brand and to the mission that you can't he gets even more influence than I would say just a CEO got hired off the street was, right? Founder, like he has, there's so much of Elon invested in the Tesla brand, the narrative, that it gives him even more influence for sure. But anyway, at the end of the day, a CEO of a publicly traded company doesn't get to go make any transformational change unless he's sold the board on it.
Let me ask you another one. What do you do with dealerships, right? Because one of the things that, I mean, we've talked about it before. They make money on maintenance. Electric cars have very little maintenance. They don't want to do it. They're independent enterprises. So even the AG, the corporate, Audi AG and BMW AG, they really can't do much about it if they don't want to sell their electric cars. And there are laws all over the place in the United States where you can do direct sales unless you're a company like Tesla that never had the dealership system in place. How do you deal with that problem?
Couple things. Long term, we're going to see a larger and larger transition of direct to consumer sales. We are already seeing a direct to consumer sales transition in everything. I mean, the number one used car sales dealership is CarMax, where most of the people actually buy the car online. They don't deal with the salesperson. I mean, that's the number one. CarMax sells more than the next 40 competitors combined in used vehicles. So we've already seen a large shift in people going direct to consumer with vehicles. I mean, we're going direct to consumer with everything. So that's part of it. Long term, I think you are going to, that dealerships may very well still exist. However, they're not going to be profiting off a maintenance model anymore. There's going to be maintenance electric vehicles need, but it's nowhere even remotely close as what you can do with ICE vehicles. And although legacy manufacturers may be tempted to do engineered obsolescence, I hope they learn from the mistake of the 80s when GM and I think Ford also got exposed for engineering their cars to break down. And American car brands have still not recovered from that damage to reputation. So some of them may play in that realm to try and say operation and maintenance, but the long-term answer is dealerships are no longer going to be the big profit centers they are for their owners. They're going to become much more of showrooms. And that's just the future of commerce, period. But the short answer is there are the number of dealerships in America, in the world, will not be sustainable. There will be people who make it. There will be people who adapt and survive, but a lot of them will go bankrupt. And that's what happens when you have advancements, when you have transitions and disruptions in markets.
So then I guess I'm going to add, since I have a phone number of the new BMW Group CEO, right? I would call you up and say that I'll suggest one more is my belief is that dealership model can still survive in terms of making money if the money is not made on maintenance. The money made is through digital products that the cars will offer, from internet connection, the music streaming services, other entertainment services. There's tons of create an app store and go Apple route and stuff like that. To me, that is how you can still have a profitable model of selling cars, because direct sales, still the profit margins are not that big, and this is the way to make money out of all this thin air, because this is ones and zeros, just the software.
And for some of these legacy manufacturers, that's a business they're not in right now. What we're talking about is expanding into the software business, and Tesla is actually more in the software business kind of first, and the car business, and Tesla's a lot of businesses, and one of them is a software business. These legacy auto manufacturers are going to have to get in the software business long term, especially looking at an autonomous world. Eventually, the hardware in your car is really not going to matter, especially when autonomous cars are taking us where we're going. We're not driving them, so we're not going to be doing crazy acceleration things and stuff like that. So long term, there's a software business, and absolutely, I think there's a lot of these dealerships that will still be they will still be able to be in business. They will still have salespersons. They will still make a profit. They will just be much smaller operations because they won't have an entire maintenance side of the house. They may employ less salesmen because customers are getting so much of their information online, and less salespeople can make more sales because there's less customer education having to be being done. Yeah, these places will still exist. They're just going to be offering a more limited scope in their services. And yeah, absolutely. I think a salesperson can be very vital in selling you on an upsell on why you should have this software feature and that hardware feature at a dealership. I'm just saying what the scope of the dealerships are now is going to very much decrease.
Yeah, and let's not forget the subscription model that Volvo is taking their cars. That also includes insurance services and so forth. So I think we're on the same page there. Let's see what happens. Let's see if they listen. Let's see what happens with the new BMW boss. I have a feeling that Audi might want to make some, or Volkswagen Group in general might want to make some changes as well. I hope they do. But before we go, let us know what's happening with your podcast. What are you guys working on?
Yeah, so we're in like episode 10 now of the Tesla Geek Show. On the most upcoming episode, which we are going to be recording on Sunday, we're going to do a deep dive into Neuralink. And basically what I discovered is a lot of people don't know what Neuralink is doing, and they did a big presentation last night where they kind of unveiled their technology, what the future of it is, what the long-term goal is. Elon even let it slip that they've actually had a monkey control a computer with its brain via Neuralink, which nobody's really talking about yet because they didn't unveil the full details. But anyways, we're going to get into that and more on the next episode of Tesla Geek Show. You can find us on all the podcast apps. Please check us out. If you like it, keep listening. If not, no worries. But we'd love to have you listen to our show and tell us what you think.
And the link is in the description of this video. All right, man. As always, it's a great conversation. I can't wait until the next weekend. We're going to do this again. Other than that, have an awesome weekend.
Alex, love being on your show, man. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Take it easy, man. Okay, so I really hope that this I mean I'm when I say hope, I mean dream, I guess. But I really do want the legacy manufacturers to start turning around. I'm happy to see BMW CEO being out, a pathetic effort with everything that's been going on with the BMW's electrification. I do have to say I hope whoever's in charge of marketing and Audi needs to go as well. I'm just, it's embarrassing these pictures that we're seeing today. On electric, so lots of change needs to be made, but I agree with Eli. It needs to start with the with the top down, and people who don't have the heart, people don't believe in this, or not behind this electrification efforts, definitely need to go. Now, let me remind you about our efforts. And by the way, let me welcome one of my newer Patreons, Felipe Celestin. Thank you for supporting me on Patreon and supporting our FIDA YouTuber program. For only $5 a month, you can help out this guy. Food, shelter, and video equipment will all be provided with your money. So go to patreon.com/e4electric. And even if you don't want to spend any money today, there's something for free for you as well. Our bonus articles go out every weekend. These are the stories that we don't cover. I just don't have time to cover on this channel or on our website E4Electric. So you can get the bonus articles every Saturday. Just go to e4electric.com/VIP. All right, guys, looking forward to your comments if you haven't started typing them already. Other than that, see you next time, and remember to stay charged.